Hello ladies and gents, and welcome back to another video. I'm filming this from Muscat in Oman. We arrived here earlier this morning. I say we, I mean myself, Harry and Soph. I think they're somewhere back there, can't really tell, especially with these dark sunglasses on, they're absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, we are here for a 12-day road trip with one of our local friends, Khalid, which we are all very much excited for. Anyway, before that trip begins, I figured I would take this opportunity to film a little editing tutorial for you guys to show you kind of, I guess, how I edit my photos. Now, there's not going to be full length. I'm hoping to get this done in 15 minutes or less, because if I did do a full length editing tutorial, you guys would be sat here for, I don't know, 7, 8 hours maybe. Most of that footage would consist of me staring into the screen and bashing my fists against the desk and wishing that I hadn't stopped drinking. So yeah, gonna try to condense this into 15 minutes. I hope you find it helpful, and with that said, I should probably head back to the hotel. I cannot begin to explain how many times I've tried to film this intro, and in doing so, I've walked a number of kilometers away from the hotel. So with that said, let's head back to the hotel and find a suitable place to get this editing tutorial done. Alright guys, I think I found somewhere suitable to film this editing tutorial. Just going to do it in the bedroom here, and before I get to it, I should actually say that I'm filming this on the Osmo Pocket 3. I picked this up a couple of days ago in Dubai. I thought it'd be pretty handy for vlog style videos and things like that, and actually turns out that it might be kind of useful for this. Hopefully the audio is decent, but if it sucks, please just let me know in the comments and I'll try and figure out a way of making it better in the videos going forward. Anyway, as you can see on the screen here, I mean, it's a little contrasty so you can kind of see what's going on, but we've got a sunrise shot from Salat in East Bali, and this was taken on a video. I think I posted 2 videos ago from a sunrise mission to East Bali, and this was one of my favorite photographs from that shoot. You might not be able to see now if I just kind of take the contrast out of this so you have a better idea of what's going on. You can see the motorbike coming up the street. We've got traditional Balinese architecture on the left and right hand side. We've got the bamboo pendles like coming over the street, and then of course we have the jungle and Mount Agung in the background with a really beautiful cloud on top of it as well. Really like this image, and so I wanted to take you through how I would edit this photo. As I mentioned earlier, it's not going to be a full-length tutorial. You'll be here for hours, and I want to try and get through this quickly just to give you a basic understanding of what my editing process looks like, and 90% of which takes place in Lightroom. So I'm just going to stick to Lightroom for this, and I think in future videos I will, you know, move into Photoshop and show you exactly how I use that tool to create some of the work that I do. Anyway, before I start editing a shot, I usually kind of take a seat and try to digest what exactly is going on here and where I want to take this photo going forward. So if I reset the image, as you can see, it's very, very dark in the foreground. So I'm going to want to lift the shadows up a little bit here. I want to also, I think, let's see, yeah, lift the shadows in the foreground. I want to darken and add a lot more color to the sky. And I want to also bring in some of these oranges here in the building. So I have a nice contrast between like blue, orange, and I guess that's all here. I guess that's all that's here actually, yeah. Blue and orange. God, I sound like those teal and orange kind of guys, you know? I need to be careful. But I think that's basically what I want to do with this. Fortunately, we had that slither of light coming through the gaps in the buildings, which lights up the face on our subjects, which I think is a really nice touch. If we didn't have that, then I think our subject might be kind of lost amongst the street and the details in the foreground. But fortunately, we got that light. So I'm going to start off this edit with a crop. I'm going to keep this in the original crop in 3:2, I think it is. And I'm just going to crop over to this side here. I'll also bring it in a little from the right-hand side. Move that down a little. And I think around about there is fine, I guess. I don't bloody know. Okay, yeah, I think that's fine. Then I'll work on just the basic adjustments on the right-hand side. So I think I want to make this a little bit warmer. I think we'll take that up to 6,000. Bring the exposure up a bit. It's looking a little bit dark in the foreground. Highlights can come down, maybe to -50. Shadows I want up to around 45. And then blacks, I'll soften the blacks a little. I'll just bring that up to +20. And I think, yeah, I'll put a little bit of vibrance in there. So that goes up to +20. So basic adjustments, you know, before and after. Just brought out some details in the shadows and I guess retain some of the information in the highlights in the sky. And then added a bit of color through the vibrance slider. Very, very simple. Then moving down, I think I'm going to tackle the tone curve. Minor adjustments there. I'm just going to lift it up from the blacks. If I hold Option to kind of anchor a point onto the shadows, move that up a little, and then we've got highlights as well. I'll make them a little punchier because I quite like the way it affects the midground here, and boost the highlights across the bottom of the volcano. That looks pretty smart. I think before I move on to HSL, I'll actually move down a little bit. You might notice here in the shot that this building on the right, I'm not sure why it's doing this, but the building is kind of oddly slanted. I mean, it's not like that in real life. I don't really understand what happened here. It might have been the perspective at which I captured the shot. I'm not too sure. So I want to try and straighten this out just a little bit. So if we come down to Transform, I'm going to click on these guidelines here to create some custom guidelines. And I'm just going to pull these or put one here along this kind of straightish line on the edge of that temple, and then let's see, I will add another one right here. Okay, that's made it a little bit straighter. I'm going to drag this over just a little bit more, and there you go. I think that's, yeah, that's looking a little bit better now. Okay, cool. So back up to the color mixer with HSL, and this isn't where I do all the heavy lifting for my color grading. I usually go between using HSL here and then calibration, which is the bottom menu tab thing that you can see here on Lightroom. I use a mixture of those two things to create my color grade, and I also maybe use selective color in Photoshop, but I'm going to cover that in another video at a later date. But if we go back up to HSL, I think what I'll start by doing is we've got some yellows in here. Yeah, I'm going to move those over to the left, maybe to -20. Blues can come down to -10. And then usually what I find with shots like this, especially when I've got a street in the shadows, I find it often contains a lot of purples in it. I don't know if that's just Canon color science, but I find that I get a lot of purples in streets and in shadows like that. So I'll typically move the purples over to the left, just to try and eliminate some of that. I don't know, -50 is probably fine. I'm not zooming in to check this right now as I'm trying to keep it short, but I think that should be okay. Then over to saturation, I want to bump up the oranges a little bit, maybe to +15. Yeah, it's not too intense on their skin, and still is, I think, a-okay on the buildings here. We've got some yellows as well. Yeah, I think +5 is probably fine. And then blues, yeah, we'll take that up maybe to +15. Then moving on to luminance, I'm going to bring oranges up. I think that looks quite nice at 15. And then blues I will take down just to darken the sky ever so slightly. So maybe just a -15. Yes. Yes, I think this is okay. You'll notice that it doesn't have my typical grade yet. A lot of that comes through selective masks, which I'm going to move to in just a moment. So fear not. Moving down, I am going to add a little bit to the highlights. I think I just want them to be slightly warmer. Yep, that works. And midtones, I might bring those down slightly, just to -5. Yeah, I think that's fine. On the sharpening here, the default is typically sharpening at +40. I don't really want the sharpening to be applied across the whole image, so what I'll typically do is go down to this masking feature and I'll hold Option on Mac. Sorry for Windows users, I don't know what that is. But I'll just hold Option on the masking and then drag this along And you'll see here that the white areas is where the sharpening is now being applied. So mostly, you know, to our subject, to the finer lines around the volcano, the bamboo poles, and some of the buildings. I'd rather keep the other areas a little bit softer. I know it's, you know, it's fairly minimal and maybe not noticeable to the naked eye. But I like to try and have certain parts of the image a little bit sharper than others, just to draw a little bit more focus to them. So that's sharpening done. Denoise is a pretty good tool, but the noise isn't savage here, and to be honest, I was probably going to add some grain anyway, so it's probably going to look a little bit noisier. But denoise is a great tool that, you know, I'll cover in another video if you know, and if you haven't already used it, I'd highly recommend it. It really works well. Okay, moving down. Profile corrections. You're going to want to enable these if they're not already automatically enabled. But with my R5 and the 2470, these are automatically applied. I don't know if it's something I've done or or just something that Lightroom does for me, but yeah, automatically done. Make sure to do that yourself if they're not already automatically applied. Then moving down, don't need to transform this. No lens blur, no effects. You know, might add a little bit of grain, maybe 10 or so. I find that sometimes it helps with skies that have banding in them. Banding is just basically when you've got those kind of bands of color running through it. You know, it could be like from white to aqua to blue to purple to aqua. Looks awful, and so I find adding a little bit of grain typically helps. Let's move that back down to 10 for my OCD. And then to calibration, I will move the blues down to the left a little bit. I might increase the saturation there to 10, and I also want to mess with the green hue, and I'll try moving the green saturation up ever so slightly, maybe just to 10. Okay, and I think for now that's a pretty good base. From here, I'm just going to scroll up in case I want to make any global adjustments in the basic panel, but from here I'm going to use selective masks to really bring this to life. Hopefully bring it to life. You know, it's kind of strange doing an editing tutorial and trying to cram this into 15 minutes because usually, as I mentioned in the introduction, I will take hours to edit a photo, and gladly, you know, it doesn't bother me that I take hours to do these things. I really enjoy sitting here and picking the image apart bit by bit. So I think what I want to work on first would be the sky, and I mentioned earlier that I'd really like to darken the sky to try and bring some focus back into the center of the image. So we will start with this. What did we start with? I didn't even mention. A linear gradient, right? That is what this thing is called. Yeah, okay, a linear gradient, cool. So let's see. If I press O, let's darken this. Maybe minus 1.25. Okay, that looks fairly decent. A little bit more saturation, maybe up to 15. And here you'll see where I've gone minus 1.25, and with the saturation, it's also darkened. You know, it's darkened this bamboo pole. It's darkened this this altar in the home temple on the left hand side, and also the roof here, which is not what I wanted to do. I only wanted to darken the sky. So to get rid of that, what we can try and do is right-clicking on our filter here, and then we want to intersect with. And I'm going to choose color range. Now I'm going to select the blue of the sky. And if I press O, you can see the area affected is now the sky, and it's removed it from the bamboo poles and from the building on the right hand side, also the trees. I think if I bring the refine down, you'll see it will create a more selective selection. I don't really know how else to say that. But I think if I move it up ever so slightly, it's just going to create a slightly better feathering around the bamboo poles and the building over here and the tree. So we're not going to have any harsh kind of lines or halo effect around those objects in the shot. Maybe we can move that up to 60. And yeah, okay, that looks pretty decent. Okay, now we've done that one filter. If I hide that, turn it on, hide that, turn it on, I think it makes a noticeable difference. I think it looks pretty good. And if I actually go before and after for the entire image, before, after, not bad for, you know, what are we at? Maybe 12, 13 minutes work. Couple more filters that I want to add though. So if we go back up to plus, and radial gradient. I would like to make the subject, or the area around the subject, slightly brighter. You know, of course, if I go +1, that's going to look slightly ridiculous. Doesn't look realistic at all. But if I just go to 0.2, maybe 0.3, and I lift the shadows a little bit, maybe to +10. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too bright. It's hard to know exactly what this will look like on YouTube. Hopefully it's clear that it's making a difference, and at the same time doesn't look ridiculous. But if I press enter there, looks pretty good. And I think final few touches, let's see, the street is still quite blue. I mean, I suppose it's in the shadows, but typically I don't really like blue roads or blue shadows in my shots. Now, I could go ahead and, maybe go down to the color grading section here and add slightly warmer shadows. I'll try maybe slightly warmer midtones. Maybe slightly orange there. I think maybe I need to move the hue, make it a little bit cooler so the sky isn't so aqua. Okay. And final touch here would maybe be to, let's see, I might just bring the texture up a little bit. And I think perhaps add one more filter here, radial gradient. I know I added those warmer midtones just a second ago, but I think I'll also just make it slightly warmer by putting a radial filter over it and increasing the temperature maybe to 7. That drives me crazy. I wish it was a round number. I'm going to go minus just to subtract something from this linear gradient, from this radial gradient. And if I press O to see the affected area, I can just drag a linear gradient over it like so, just so that warmth isn't affecting the trees up the top. And I think with that, maybe I lift the shadows up just to, no, I'll keep them exactly as they were. I think, what are we missing here? A little bit more saturation in the orange, I think. Move that up to 30. And I think one more linear gradient. You can see my editing process, it went from a pretty structured at the beginning to a complete mess now. So exposure minus 0.3. Just want to darken that sky a little bit more again. I could even just reduce the highlights instead of messing around with the exposure. Highlights down to -25. Okay. It's funny, now I've changed the blue. I'm now looking back at this shot and looking back at the edit and wanting to make the sky a little bit more accurate. So I think what I'll do is just bring the hue of blue primary down to about there. And I think that's it. So yeah, what are we at? About 16-17 minutes? That's really not too bad. I was worried that this might take me 45-50 minutes or something like that. But pretty happy with this end result. And I really hope that it gave you a little insight into the way in which I edit my photos. Of course, I didn't take this into Photoshop or any of the other programs that I use, but like I mentioned earlier, I think I'm going to cover those in another video. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments. And I think with that, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.